Hello, guitar nerds. This is Rod Goelz. I'm with Jeff Gibble, State College, PA. Today we're going to talk a little bit about a little music appreciation. I always believe that we should appreciate musicians before they die. We should give them royal treatment before they pass on. So anyway, Jeff Beck is still with us. He's 76 years old. He's inspired many people in ways you might not expect. So that's what we're going to talk about. Of my group of people and my friends, and Jeff is going to deny this, but he probably knows as much as anybody. He will deny it. I haven't listened to it in 20 years. Okay, whatever.
But I haven't really.
Okay. So Jeff Beck was born in 1944.
July.
Huh?
July, wasn't it like 12th? Or was that the wrong day?
Yeah. So he is he first heard the guitar, from what I can tell, when he was 6 years old. He heard Les Paul and Mary Ford. Les Paul playing an electric guitar. And it was a Gibson Les Paul, probably. And
1944 now. Well, of course. How old was he?
76.
No. When did he hear Les Paul?
He said it was when he was 6 years old.
Yeah, they didn't come out with Les Paul till 52, so
Okay.
it would have probably been that ES 295.
That's not the log, is it?
No, that's the gold thing. The hollow body looked like kind of like a 175, something like that.
Okay. So he, at that point, How High the Moon was the big song, and Les Paul had guitar effects when guitar effects weren't a thing, because he made them. Les Paul was the father of the solid body guitar. He made a solid body guitar out of a acoustic guitar. He called it the log, and he was a master, not only a master musician, a very creative musician, but he coaxed sounds out of the guitar that nobody else heard. And that was 6 years of age. A young Jeff Beck says to his mother, "That's what I want to do," and she says, "That's an electric guitar. That's just tricks, smoke and mirror tricks and stuff like that." And he goes, "That's fine. I want some of that." So, in the spirit of that is why we celebrate the life of Jeff Beck. So, as far as he was 21 years old when he joined the Yardbirds, 1965.
Yeah.
A little over a year. Then he went nuts. Missed his girlfriend. I guess is admirable. But anyway, his early influences, as I said, Les Paul, Cliff Gallup from Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps. A lot of rockabilly guys. Like Cliff Gallup. Yeah, I didn't know this. I didn't know Cliff Gallup wasn't in the Blue Caps for very long. That's the only guy I associate with the Blue Caps.
Yeah.
So, anyway, and he liked Scotty Moore, Melvis, and a lot of the early rock and roll. That was when he came of age and when he started playing guitar, that's what was happening. And so he really didn't like the blues right away. He was like a rockabilly guy, and he liked to make sounds. And he liked, as I said, he was the guy that everybody else was like all blues crazy, and like he was friends with both Jimmy Page and Eric Clapton, but Eric Clapton, in contrast, was a blues elitist. He all he ever wanted to do was play the blues, and he was miserable if he wasn't playing it. In 1963, 64, but that's where his head was at that point. Jeff Beck didn't have that problem. And I'm going to say one story that I heard was he befriended Ian Stewart of the Rolling Stones piano player before he was a Rolling Stone. and Ian loaned him an album that had Buddy Guy on it, and apparently that was the thing that changed it. Okay, you can play the blues like a with that Les Paul kind of like, let's create sounds instead of just notes.
Mm-hmm.
So that is where we are. That is where he began. And then he played in the Tridents, and the Yardbirds needed a guitar player, and the Yardbirds were a super group, kind of. They were a very important group in the history of rock and roll. Starting the careers of Eric Clapton. I don't know if you want to say starting the career of Jimmy Page. He was already in there, but it certainly didn't hurt his career. It sent it off into a different directory. And then Jeff Beck, it started his career, essentially.
Yeah, Jimmy Page kind of recommended him.
Yeah,
because
they offered to gig to Jimmy Page first.
Yeah, because he didn't really want to offend Clapton by taking the gig, so he sicked Jeff Beck on him.
Yeah. So the deal also was Jimmy Page, and I'm sure most people know this, but he was a session player. He made all those rock and roll sounds in London. Like he was the one on the "You Really Got Me" by the Kinks. He played on a lot of the Donovan tunes. He was the rock guy. There's two big studio guitar players in London in the early '60s: Big Jim Sullivan and Jimmy Page, two Jims. So he was doing all these rock things, and he was feeling pretty mighty and all that. And then, from what I hear, after Jeff Beck quit, they were in a band together.
Yeah, Paul Samuel Smith was the bass player.
Yeah.
And he left. And then they wanted Jimmy Page to play bass, and I guess he might have played bass for like.
That's when he joined. He joined as a bass player.
Yeah, but they sort of switched. Him and the rhythm guitar player switched.
Chris, yeah.
And that guy actually became a photographer, and he photographed the pictures on the back of the first Led Zeppelin album. That was the rhythm guitarist in the Yardbirds.
Okay.
So that was his. I think he did that, like, obviously pretty professionally, I believe, then for the rest of his career. As the rest, they say, is history.
Yeah.
They were in a movie called Blow Up together.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Where they really botch up. Train kept a rolling.
Yeah, and they call it Stroll On. So Jimmy Page learned how to avoid copyright issues really early in his career.
Yeah.
So, and it's only like it's like a minute long. It's like over. I mean, I watched the whole movie just to see that little part. Like it's gone, Because they don't show the whole song. They only show that part where he gets mad and smashes his guitar.
Yeah.
Against that Vox. I think
what a wonderful. That would have been a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
The two of them in the same band.
Yeah, but it's 3 months. I think is all it was. I remember the first 45 that I had for the Yardbirds. I mean, it was long. It was like $2 when I bought it because it was a collectible. Because after records were out of print, after they were out of print, I was like, that's it. It was done. So this would have been a teacher I had in high school was big into record collecting. So I started talking to him, and he said, well, yeah, I can look for that. And he found it for me. It was Happenings 10 Years Time Ago, which is one of the songs they were on together. John Paul Jones was actually the bass player on it.
Yardbirds.
Yeah, on that song, on that Happenings 10 Years Time Ago. John Paul Jones was the bass player on that song. Okay. Yeah. You know the song, right?
No.
Oh no, that's one of the ones they were on together.
Okay.
And like I said, John Paul Jones was the bass player on that particular song. I'm not sure why. They didn't need reasons back then. Producers. You remember back then it was the Beatles had to fight to get themselves on their own recordings.
I hear. If you listen, who's the drummer? Bernard Purdy says he was the drummer for the Beatles. And Ringo's not even on the Beatles tracks.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I don't believe it either, but
I know he wasn't on
the. His story changes throughout the years.
Yeah, the real early Beatles songs. I think the first session they did, I think they wouldn't let Ringo play. They had a session guy.
Yeah, Love Me Do was not Ringo.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, it was like the 62 or 63 era.
Yeah.
Just one session. They wouldn't. The producer, I don't even know if it was George Martin.
It was George Martin.
Yeah, they wouldn't let him play. And it's because it was an assembly line. It was like, well, we got these session guys that could come in and knock the job out the first time.
Yeah.
Get it right. So you know, and that carried over into Eric Clapton with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. I mean, he had turned that Marshall amp up to 10, and they were so afraid they were going to blow up their Neumann microphone that they moved it like 20 feet away. Because his amp was so loud. But he did that, and it's like it got that room sound, and so suddenly they created this whole thing where, there's a new sound, because of necessity. Like, I want to protect my microphone. Oh no, you're going to blow it up if you're too loud.
Well, back then they considered distortion to be a bad thing.
Yeah, and they try to get rid of it. And now we reverse engineer it and try to put it back in.
Yeah.
So, but they were on Happenings 10 years time ago, and Stroll On. Well, they called it Stroll On in the movie. The train kept rolling, and I think it was Psycho Daisies was the other song they were on. I forget what that one was like, but Happenings 10 years time ago was like, that's the one that I bought on 45, and the flip side of it was a song called "The Naz Are Blue," and I think this was pre-Todd Rundgren Naz, so I don't know what that was in reference to, but it was again them trying to avoid copyright because it was nothing more than right? It's Dust
like
by Broom. Yeah. And Jeff Beck sang it, and they called it the Naz Are Blue, so they didn't have to pay copyright royalty on it,
Well, yeah.
I guess. Apparently that was fairly common. I mean, Charlie Parker, they told him, you can't play the melody to Cherokee, but you can improvise on the chord changes, and we'll call it Coco, and nobody's gonna know. So, there they go. So it was kind of commonplace, and then they're being told to do that by the lawyers, I'm sure. So it's not like, it's not like they sat back and thought, what kind of sneaky way can we steal these songs? I mean, they were being coached on it, I'm sure. But then I told you I was going to tell you a radio story, because Tom likes the radio stories. So when I was 13 or 14, you'll appreciate this.
Okay.
When I was 13 or 14, I was like a typical 13 or 14-year-old guitar player for that time period, and I was into stuff like this.
Yeah.
Or, so you know the songs too, right? Back then, Starview was they were the radio station to listen to, and which is kind of cool, because I guess some of these groups we're in have Starview as like the like some members from Starview, right? So they had a 2 for Tuesday. So Jeff Beck was coming up, and of course I had been hearing about this guy because I liked Eric Clapton, I liked Jimmy Page, but I didn't know who Jeff Beck was. So they had a 2 for Tuesday, and they played 2 songs. They played "Going Down," and they played "Blue Wind." So this would have had to have been like 76, because it was on Wired, at least. And I heard "Going Down" was kind of cool because it was bluesy, but I was always looking for more than that, because I mean, remember I told you it was into Tommy Bolin, so I already knew what that was, right? So then they played "Blue Wind," and I hear this, right? Okay, and it's clean, and I'm thinking, I'm hearing all the hype about Jeff Beck. It's like, well, this guy's like the greatest guitar player, right? being a 13 or a 14-year-old kid that was into, you know, I'm like, this guy's not any good. He doesn't use any distortion, you know, which is funny, because the funny thing is that 2 years later, I was the total Jeff Beck fanatic then, at that point. And I heard him, I was in a band that played lots of Aerosmith, and, you know, that kind of stuff, right? And one night, somebody had the album there. It was live with the Jan Hammer group, right? And whatever reason, I put headphones on and started listening to it. I thought, well, I had to give this guy a second chance, because I had read in Downbeat magazine, they compared Jeff Beck. He made the Beatles on She's a Woman. He made the Beatles sound like John Coltrane on a Jamaican holiday. Now, that's a pretty robust description of what's going on. So I thought, I probably should give this guy a second chance, right? Distortion or not. And of course, it was a live album, so there's tons of distortion all over it. And wow, that album changed my life. You know,
Jan Hammer.
Like that. I mean, it was like that. I just could not believe what I was hearing. That was one of those few moments that you hear in your life where you just, you can trace it to that one point, just everything changed. Mm-hmm. I put the second side on first. I didn't intend on doing it. I just pulled the album out of the jacket, stuck it on the record player, put headphones on, and started listening. But the first thing you hear is Jan Hammer's keyboard going like that, right? And it kind of goes into the making it sound like the keyboard. You want to know how to sound like a keyboard. Just kind of pick, it's the way you pick really lightly, and Jeff Beck kind of did that, and for sure, he definitely picked up on the Jan Hammer stuff from playing with him, because you can hear
the thing that oscillator wheel.
Yeah.
That Jan Hammer used to play when he's trying to copy the sound of a guitar player.
Yeah.
I hear Jeff Beck
doing the opposite.
Trying to copy Jan Hammer, him.
And so the funny thing was that, you know, here I was like 2 years earlier, or whatever long it was, 2 years earlier was listening to this and thinking, this guy's not any good, because I heard those two songs on the radio. Back when Starview was actually really cool. They used to have Triple Z Jazz like a couple times a day. And you'd hear Jeff Beck, you'd hear Santana. They're the two that I remember, but you probably heard Weather Report. I mean, whatever was popular in that style, they would play it. I mean, this was on a rock radio station, and they'd play it, which was really cool. And I know we have a couple like former employees of Starview. I don't know if they were there from that time period or not, but that was an awesome radio station.
Yeah,
radio. I mean,
that's when radio was really helping.
Yeah.
So Jeff Beck. So he leaves the Yardbirds, and he forms the original Jeff Beck group, which features Ronnie Wood and Rod Stewart. That's probably the first big gig for both of those artists.
Yeah, and I went backwards, because I got the Jan Hammer thing, and then I went backwards to Wired, and then went back to the Rough and Ready period, and then back to the Rod Stewart stuff. So, but you know, you had Beck's Bolero, which of course was pretty much the Happenings 10 Years Time Ago band. It was Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones on bass. I think it was Keith Moon on drums, which I guess is.
Didn't Jimmy Page have a really big part in that? He wrote the song?
He says he did. Jeff Beck says that he wrote it, and I never quite understood why they couldn't both say they both wrote it together, but apparently it turned into sort of a semi-feud about it for a while. Jimmy Page apparently did the. Let's see. That stuff, right? See. Page, and then Jeff Beck was. He's the one that made the major 7 chord, right, out of the melody.
which is something to talk about. That is like that's bigger ears than normal people have.
Yeah, that's if anyone wants a challenge, go ahead and try to play it and sing the melody. I tried to do that last night. I'm not going to sing on this. There's no way. I tried to sing that melody and play that, and I'm like, wow, that's really hard. That's really to sing that, to play that chord and then sing that note. It's, wow, you know. But yeah, it was pretty adventurous, and the way Jeff Beck describes it, Jimmy Page played the chords, he played the melody. So why can't they say they both wrote it? I guess.
Yeah.
They never could agree on that.
So the Jeff Beck group, I love the Jeff Beck group. They're pre-Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a prototype that a better version than the Yardbirds, I think.
Yeah. And on Beck's Bolero, I think the one thing that was kind of cool, I think John Entwistle was actually supposed to be on it too. I'm not sure if he actually made it on there because I think perhaps John Paul Jones played keyboard as well, so I'm not really sure of the thing, but apparently the rumor was that Keith Moon and John Entwistle were really tired of being in The Who. So
they're going to join Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, so they wanted that was supposed to be the original Led Zeppelin band, but of course it never worked out.
Mm-hmm.
There was I never got into that early stuff quite as much with Rod Stewart, just because I was into Led Zeppelin at that point, you know. But the Rough and Ready stuff to me was, I think, showed off his guitar work a lot more, like a more well-rounded player.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget the name of the song. There was one on Rough and Ready that he did this little chord intro thing that was really cool. Stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
So he obviously grew up as a player, you know.
That's the key thing here. It's like when you hear Jeff Beck 1965, he was one kind of player, which he was cutting edge then.
Mm-hmm.
But 2 years later, Jeff Beck group, it was a different sort of cutting edge.
Yeah.
And that group existed for 2 albums. Okay. Yeah. After that group,
Beck, Bogart, yep. Yeah.
Which I'm not the biggest fan of.
Yeah, they had their moments.
It sounds like a train wreck to me, but
yeah, they actually had their moments. They were pretty good. They did a pretty cool version of Superstition. Probably that's the reason why everybody likes to play that song now. One reason or another, I mean, Stevie Ray Vaughan played it, you know, but I think he probably covered it because of Jeff Beck. I mean, that was their introduction. The interesting thing is, Jeff Beck actually played the guitar on the Stevie Wonder version.
Did he?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I never knew that.
I don't know if he was on any of the... You can barely hear it, though. That's the weird thing. But they didn't credit him because, I guess...
Well, I know Stevie Wonder wrote the song for Jeff Beck.
Yeah, yeah.
And he later recorded it on his own thing.
Yeah, he was... Stevie Wonder had written it for him, and I guess... He was in a car accident or something, and
in the late 60s, yeah.
Yeah, or must have been in another one. This was,
that thing was probably Jeff Beck.
Yeah, he did it with Beck, Bogart and the BBA band, and I guess Stevie Wonder didn't like it all that much, so that's when he did his own recording of it.
Yeah. Then after the BBA, what was BBA? And then there's the next Jeff Beck group, which
that was the Rough and Ready period.
Yeah, with Max Middleton and this idea of reinvention that is admirable. It's kind of reminds me of the Beatles in a different way. Beatles did the same thing. They completely reinvented themselves every couple of albums.
Yeah, that was probably some of my favorite stuff that he did, at least with vocalists, was that Rough and Ready period. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I really liked that period more so than most of the other ones was because he actually wrote a lot of the songs. either by himself or a lot of times with Max Middleton. And he, as you know, he hasn't written very many songs throughout his career, and that was one time period where he seemed to be very, very prolific in terms of composing, and his songs are actually, like I said, that little chord progression, that's pretty cool stuff, just to go through that, and there's plenty other ones too. Starts playing around with odd time signatures, things like that, which find out later that's a pretty big part of what they were doing. But that was for me, that's why I like that area. And of course, it has also had Going Down on it, but which was one of the first songs which was okay because it had a lot of distortion on it. It was
he redeemed himself.
Yeah. Well, that was the first one I heard, and then I heard Blue Wind, and I'm like, that's terrible. And of course, later on, I turned into a complete, freak over those songs, man. They're really cool, but at the time, you're 13 or 14 thinking that your genius comes from you stacking as many distortion pedals together as you could, right?
Yes.
Which doesn't work. Then came Blow by Blow, and of course, remember, I got into Live with Jan Hammer Group first, and I worked my way backwards, so I heard that after I heard Wired. And going from Wired back to Blow by Blow it wasn't really a letdown, but it was definitely different because Wired was so intense. I mean, it had all that intensity, and Blow by Blow was really laid back in comparison, But of course, Blow by Blow was produced by George Martin, so there's the link to the Beatles, and definitely had some really cool moments on it. But Wired had that intensity.
What's funny about his ears, when I say this, he wasn't a theoretical guy. Jeff Beck.
Yeah, I always wondered how much he actually knows, but he obviously knows a lot.
He's intuitive about everything.
Yeah.
But the fact that his intuition is so has such good taste. In other words, a lot of that stuff, a lot of people who study and have taken from Jeff Beck are these guys that are like jazz, like the Scott Hendersons and the Mike Sterns of the world, and they went somewhere else with it. Mm-hmm. But they actually studied the music and they studied what he's doing. Some of the things that I'm thinking, like with Jeff Beck, is like why is Jeff Beck important? As I said, that exploration. I'm not sure. Jimi Hendrix inspired by Jeff Beck?
Well, I think they were both. Neither one of them. Did you hear
Jeff Beck before he made it to England?
Oh, I'm sure he did. He knew the Yardbirds. I mean, I remember there's that famous. It's not the Yardbirds, obviously it's the Beatles, but there's a very famous video of Jimi Hendrix playing Sgt. Pepper in some hall somewhere. It's black and white. It's a black and white movie. It was the beginning of Monterey Pop Festival on the VHS version, but it's not on the DVD. And it's Hendrix playing Sgt. Pepper. Now, you might think, well, that's no big deal, but if you know the date from that, it was 2 weeks after the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper. Hendrix was covering it. So he definitely was very well aware of the music scene.
This is going into Hendrix land, which we're going to have one of these for Hendrix, but he said, this isn't Hendrix, he said, when Hendrix went to Chas Chandler said, I'm going to take you to England. I said, well, if you can introduce me to Eric Clapton. Because he was absolutely influenced by Eric Clapton.
Yeah. I would imagine that he probably knew all those guys, knew of them, probably heard them. Because, Hendrix listened to everybody. They said he was...
So that exploration, the Jeff Beck, we'll just call it the Jeff Beck exploration, how it's not just notes, it's not just scales, it's sounds.
Yeah.
Soundscapes and
my other interesting radio story deals with the Wired album. Starvey used to have, and this was really cool, this tells you how cool things were back then. Starvey used to have this thing called Concert Update. He had it like 2 or 3 times a day, and they would tell you who's playing. There was like a person at the Spectrum, and who's at the Tower Theater, and who's at the Mann Music Center, and whatever else was going on at the Hershey Park and stuff. I don't know if they ever did any local bands on those things, but they would definitely do the regional stuff. And the song they used was this that Head for Backstage Pass on Wired with the bass solo at the beginning. You know, that bass solo thing that Wilbur Bascom did, and you know, and it's got the Jeff Beck. Right, and you know, I don't know if you know the song or not, but it's pretty cool. They used that. That was the music they used to announce the concerts every day, and so you knew when Concert Update was on because you heard that Jeff Beck song. Now, of course, I didn't know it was Jeff Beck until I got the album, but it was really cool. That's the background music, you know. So, hats off to our local radio station.
Yes, yes.
When it was actually, you know, when they played cool stuff, man. Like, you know, it wasn't just about what the demographics say would work. I mean, I knew somebody here in State College. It was the advertising director or whatever for a radio station, and they said they get demographics that tell you to play Rolling Stones at a certain time of day because that's when it'll sell the most advertising. That's, you know, like, wow, that's. They don't tell you to play Jeff Beck at a particular time of day. So
of course,
and of course, most people that know his name know him because of right, which is great.
What he did with Johnny Depp?
No, he didn't.
That is like, this is in the last couple of years. It's wonderful. It's like, this guy's 76 years old, and he's putting out more badass, like, than any of the kids are.
Yeah.
Myself as a kid.
No, I always feel like we're talking about him now. I feel like I'm a kid. I feel like I can still. I listened to his music yesterday because you mentioned
younger. In other words, you look at him now. He's 76 years old. I gotta believe that music has kept him younger.
Yeah, the stuff he did, like when Vinny Colaiuta was his drummer, like what was that, like 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Then of course right after that, Narada Michael Walden played with him again, because Narada Michael Walden was the guy who did that. Wired was basically his album with Jeff Beck playing guitar on it. I hate to say it that way. I mean, it's a Jeff Beck album, but let's face it, Narada Michael Walden wrote like 3/4 of the songs on it, played drums on 3/4 of the songs. You know, so stuff like, you know, you got to give the guy credit. And I remember going to the Music Merchant. Do you remember the Music Merchant in Queensgate? I thought the guy that owned it was named Dale, I think. And Dale always could tell you what the cool stuff was to listen to. And I went in there one day and he says, check out this new Jeff Beck album called There and Back. And, you know, that was my first introduction to Simon Phillips as a drummer. But of course, I found out later he had played with Stanley Clarke, which of course is probably where Jeff Beck met the guy, through Stanley Clarke.
Yeah.
He always liked harmonics too. I don't know if you ever noticed that, where he'd play melodies with, like he did that in that Blue Wind solo, where the one would go. I never knew that. I just listened to it yesterday. I'm like, I know how he's doing it now. It took me all this time to figure it out.
Yeah.
I used to just.
How many times does that happen?
Too many.
Yeah, which is good. It's like these little discoveries.
But you know, one of these days,
once impossible, now just falls in your lap.
If I live to be 1,000, maybe I'll understand a small part of what Alan Holdsworth is doing. But you know, that's like a mountain. That's Mount Everest there, man. You know, there's probably like a couple other guitar players like that, but there's another life-changing thing.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that the whole Jeff Beck thing. It's like he started off, as I said, in 1965. Every couple albums, he reinvents himself. He didn't just stick to rock, but he didn't abandon it either. As I said, what he's doing with Johnny Depp is rocking. It's badass.
I saw
he's rocking an era that doesn't listen to rock anymore. So So every couple years, he's reinventing himself. These guys like, and they're, I'm not dissing anybody to say people like Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, they were vibing off of, they were next generation of Jeff Beck.
Yeah.
Spirit in mind, spirit of exploration.
Yeah. The thing that was kind of cool about Jeff Beck was about, I think it was the when he got back together with Narada Michael Walden about, when was that, 2011, 2012, that era. They did a couple tours together. One of the songs that he had added for that tour, I don't think he's ever recorded it. Jeff Beck is like a tribute to fusion. When Vinnie Colaiuta was there, he was doing like Stratus, and he was doing Eternity's Breath by Mahavishnu. I mean, these are songs that he doesn't really have a connection with, other than they're the same genre. But he definitely liked Tommy Bolin. I know they've mentioned many times that Jeff Beck was inspired to do instrumental music because of Tommy Bolin. But anyway, on the tour with Narada Michael Walden, he starts doing a Tony Williams Lifetime song that Alan Holdsworth played on, and it didn't stick in the set very long. I think he only did it for a couple shows, from what I've seen as far as set lists go. But the fact that Jeff Beck was actually, here he is, like probably late 60s at that point, or whatever, and he's putting a Tony Williams song in his set. That's pretty cool. I mean, especially when the guitar player on the original was Alan Holdsworth, that's enough to scare anybody. Didn't scare Jeff Beck though. Yeah. So
he put his own spin on it for certain.
Yeah, he was playing that riff.
Yeah.
It's what is it? All this dissonant tritone stuff in it.
All right. We're gonna wrap this up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. We're gonna do this more. We got Hendrix to tackle.
Yeah. Plus we got Is that the lick you were talking about, like where you bend everything and then
they do that. That's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, he does that in the Blue Wind song where the melody is. Yeah, the Jan Hammer solo. I mean, I remember that sticks in my head too. He's no wonder Jeff Beck's melodic. He surrounded himself with melodic players all his life.
Yeah. Great musicians.
Yeah.
Alrighty, y'all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
And, we will do this again. This is Rod. Yep. We love guitar nerds. Share our stuff. If you like what we're doing, share it. Share it to your friends. If you don't like it, don't share it. See you all.